Hi, this is Bill Mink, and I thought this might be a convenient way for me to provide feedback to IT on the changes to the Webstudy timeline. I did get a chance to log in this morning and review all the changes. I did see some beta versions of this at a Webstudy conference in July. And it pretty much looks the same as what I expected. And its functionality is good. I did find a few little bugs, and I'll describe them now. But the timeline in the previous version was very static with regard to editing changes. There were buttons that you had to select and then go into a frame that on the lower portion of the screen that allowed you to change all the components of the particular timeline session you were looking at. That's changed dramatically, and in my opinion, for the better. Now, as I'm looking at the timeline in instructor view, I can clearly see calendar placement, the available date, the expiration date. I can make it visible or invisible. These are functions that required you to go into edit or go into the timeline matrix. You couldn't go into edit and make it visible or not visible. That was part of the timeline matrix. And then again, you had to go into edit to change other items. So let's just take a look at this, the calendar placement. You click on this. Interesting that there's no longer a dialog box for you to type in the actual time that you want this to start. It's a static feature. You've got to use these sliders, that's fine. I've tried it. I've said a couple times. It's really easy with the mouse. So I'll just say done on that one. The available date obviously is clickable. I thought it was odd that when you mouse over it, you don't get the selection, the index finger. Your mouse doesn't change at all. And I'm doing all this in Firefox, which our distance learning department has advocated as the most desirable browser. I'm not quite sure why, but they do have that on the front page. Expiration date, etc., etc. This not active is not a button. So for example, let's change the availability date from 8:31 at noon, or 12 a.m. to yesterday, and hit done. Now you've got to refresh your screen. You can do that by simply selecting timeline, and notice not active is no longer visible, but that is not a button. To edit the session, there's no longer an edit button. There's this little gear, I guess you'd call it, and that takes you into the editor, which is no longer framed. You've got tabs. So you've got your description on the first default tab where you would change the description or the official name of the session. And then you've got an activation visibility tab, and your coursework gets added directly here, which I think is much more intuitive than going into the old edit and then adding materials, etc., etc., etc. And notice, instead of having different categories, you've got tabs for your materials, your exams. In this particular case, I'm building this course. It starts in, I guess, 2 weeks. And I'm in the process of uploading my materials. So you've got your exams, quizzes, surveys, etc., etc., etc. Very straightforward. To get back to the timeline, you just simply click on that button. You've got materials here, and instead of the button you had for changing the sequence, you can simply grab things, which is, in my opinion, a neat feature, drag and drop materials. Over here you have this toolbox. You get your session list, and you can click directly to a session and it'll take you down there, somewhat of a bookmark. You also have expand and collapse. Collapsing the timeline session does just that. It collapses them, and then you can expand all, or you can come over here and expand them individually. Show dates does exactly that. It shows the dates. Interestingly enough, hide dates is not working in Firefox. That was a problem I found. So you have to go back to, you have to expand them and collapse them. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, they have to expand them and collapse them to get the dates off. I don't know why you would want that, but then again, you still see the not active non-button. I guess it's just a notification here. But other than that, I found the initial timeline to be extremely intuitive. To create a session is very simple. Okay. Here you go. And instead of having frames, you have tabs. So you put the description in, the activation and the visibility, calendar placement. They're very similar to the same functions that you found in frames in the previous version. And then once again, you can add any of your coursework from your materials, your exams, quizzes, surveys, etc. They're all tabbed in this particular instance. This is not an online class, so you'll see I have no forums. This is a web enhanced class. Same set of tools. Oops. Let's just go back to the timeline. I didn't add any features for that. Timeline introduction is just simply a single screen where you could put an introductory, not session, but an introduction to the timeline, to the course. That's where you might put the objectives from the syllabus, the course description, etc., etc., etc. I'm not advocating using it that way. That's just how I envisioned using it. So that's my take on the new timeline. It, in my opinion, is very intuitive. The first time I used this morning, which is, I've only been playing with it for about an hour, I had no problems finding things. It wasn't a dramatic change. I didn't encounter anything that I needed to get to. I was building this course yesterday, by the way, and I will continue to build it later today when I get back from the new student orientation. So anyway, I have to run, and maybe I'll add more to the dialogue later. Thanks. Take care.